Okay, it's about an hour before the debate. My goal in this video right here is to just get through this as fast as possible. I've already done another video where I took my time, and this is just helping me to say, if I went the fastest without being comprehensible, where would I be at? Doing it too fast and too slow to try to come to a happy medium, if you will. So this debate's about once saved, always saved, or another way to describe this is security of the saints. Free grace is the most faith alone position, and it's the most consistent form of OSAS, once saved, always saved. As we've already established from the three-legged stool, one look equals one moment of belief from John 3:16. Also, when you believe the gospel, you're identifying with Christ's one death that died once for all, and he dies no more. This is supported by Romans 6 and 8, 2 Timothy 2:10 and 13. This one moment of belief, which identifies us with his one death, guarantees that we will be resurrected with him at one moment in time. And this is also supported by the same passages I mentioned. Now, in these passages, it's going to talk about, especially Romans, it's going to talk about differences in inheritances. There are different types of inheritances, but salvation is secure for all saints. So here's the chart running it through Spider-Man. One moment of belief is compared to being bit by that spider once that forever makes you into Spider-Man. Now you can choose in your experience, in your walk, whether you're going to fulfill your purpose as Spider-Man or live like the bum Spider-Man out of fellowship with God. But regardless of that, you're going to get a glorified body. Okay. And you notice the ultimate is divided in two parts, the glorified body and the reward and rank. That's important to understand when we're talking about inheritance. Here's the visual representation of John 3:16. Here's the passage that helps us remind that we're talking about the one death. What do you want on your tombstone? Here's the passage, 2 Timothy 2:10 through 13. Make the chosen refer to the faithful obtaining salvation. Salvation doesn't refer to how do you get saved from the lake of fire. It's referring to the messianic rule, and with it eternal glory. That's that idea of ruling with Christ. 2 Timothy 2:11, for if we die with them, we will also live with them. The condition for living with them is dying with him. Death, as we'll see based on supported from Romans, is identifying with his death. It's not referring to water baptism, and it's not referring to a process of death. 2 Timothy 2:11 deals with reigning with him and being denied the possibility of reigning if one's not faithful or enduring. Each one of these conditional clauses is eternally consistent logic, which means you can't say, for if we died with him and if we endure with him, we will live with them. No, this is saying if we died with him, we will live with him. Here's a reminder of the chart, how 2 Timothy 2:10, which was written before Paul died, relates to Romans 6 and Romans 8, which I'll show on another slide in detail. There's how that corresponds as well to all the passages, and you'll see it demonstrated right here. Romans 6, for if we have died is free from sin. Now, if we have died with Christ, we believe we shall also live with him. Romans 8:11, it says, but if the spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, he who raised Christ Jesus from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies. No doubt about this. The condition is mentioned that we died with him. 2:11, this supports that interpretation. That's why that's mentioned at the bottom. Here's 2:11 ran through the chart so you can see that how it works. If we died with them, we will also live with them. The stuff about enduring to deny him relates to accountability in one's walk and rewards. And regardless of that, God is faithful to all of his promises. If somebody wants to try to say that it's all the same thing, then they're going to have to explain the shifts and tenses that are mentioned in this passage. Now, moving into the resurrection glory section, here's the passage 8:17. It says, if children, heirs also. Okay. On the one hand, heirs of God, but on the other hand, fellow heirs with Christ. I'm not explaining all the Greek, but I got it all highlighted if I need to. And then we see the conditional clause modifying fellow heirs, if indeed we suffer with him, so that we may also be glorified with him. The glorification here is referring to ruling and reigning And so this relates to the Second Timothy passage about enduring and reigning. But regardless, even if we're faithless in our walk, he remains faithful, for he cannot deny himself. So here's the variables you can run it through. As you can see, I got the one moment of belief in the position category, the one death in the position category. If we suffer with from this passage is in our experience, and therefore the ultimate is divided up just like the Spider-Man chart is the one resurrection is the body, but the rank is where you see the language of fellow heirs and glorified with. Here's another way to describe this inheritance. If you want to go with alliteration, you have the de jure inheritance, which is by law or by right. When you believe the gospel, you are now by law, by right, an inheritor of the kingdom. You will be there. Then you have daily inheritance, which is your provision from God, and it's not a condition for receiving the de facto inheritance, or in fact reality inheritance, when the kingdom is actually in place and where people are ruling and reigning. Now, here's a reminder that there are two positions that are talked about here. I'm just going to show you the illustrations and I'll explain these. But you have the never believed person that's condemned already based on John 3:18, and the believed once that is not condemned, 3:18. The basis of condemnation is that you never believed. Here we have the never believed bunny on one side, and we got the once believed cat on the other side. There are passages often that talk about individual sins, and people assume, oh, individual sins is why you go to the lake of fire and all of that. But no, that's not what's going on. What happens is there are times whenever a passage is talking about the moralists, and there's times when they're talking about the menacing bunny with all the fleas and stuff. The fleas represent the individual sins. And there's other passages that talk about the once believed cat, that he's a good representative, so he's cleaned up. But there's other passages that talk about him identified with his sins, so he's a bad representative. But the basis for why a person goes to the lake of fire is because one is a bunny and the other one is a cat. And here's an illustration. I'm just going to describe the picture and then unpack the analogy. This relates to John 5:24, new position, new potential. This spaceship comes through a wormhole, and at the moment it comes through the wormhole, there's a transformation of the astronaut inside. What this describes as you see that you have a new position, you're on this space station, but now you have an apparatus where you can go back into your hostile temporal environment and you can be sustained. It's a new position, new potential. So here's the point. Some people think that loss of faith means loss of salvation, but actually faith is an instrument. It's the rocket ship that places you into a new realm. All right. Faith is a rocket ship that transfers you to a new realm. The wormhole, that's the new realm on the side of it. The wormhole causes a molecular transformation. But see, if the rocket ship blows up, if faith is non-existent in the sense like we typically say we lost faith, it does not reverse that you're in a new realm. You're now a citizenship of the heavenly space station. You can choose to live in harmony with that citizenship, or you can choose to return to the temporal realm in a fallen world. Your return to the temporal realm does not reverse your citizenship in the eternal realm based on that molecular transformation. Now, here's a reminder. The truth is that we never really stop believing in something. If a person stops believing in Christianity, it's because they believe in atheism or Islam or something else like that. What makes the faith have eternal results is the object that one places their faith in. When one believes the promise of salvation in Christ for the promise of salvation, that has the eternal results of eternal security. And that's why one is once saved, always saved. So there it is. There's the stool that we've argued for. Each leg stands. Here's a reminder of the chart, the distinctions there. Now, when John 3:14 and 16 comes up, understand that it's quoting from Numbers 21, which in the context is referring to temporal discipline. It's in the experiential or the walk category. I believe that those were already believers there. And so it's talking about a temporal physical healing, but it makes a comparison with the word as that's mentioned in 3:4 of just as there was an experiential divine discipline and an experiential healing that was provided, there's also in John 3:16 one moment of belief that results in a spiritual healing. So you can see it mapped out right here. Numbers 21 in the experiential category, John 3:16 in the positional category. And sometimes people talk about the distinction between the penalty, power, and presence of sin, that when we believe the gospel, we're set free from the penalty of sin. In our walk, we're set free from the power of sin. And so you notice John 3:16 is not focusing on the power, it's focusing on the penalty. And here's some passages that some people try to argue that you got to continue to remain saved, but actually Colossians 1 compared to 2 Corinthians 12, I believe it is, or 11, shows you that what's in context is best man imagery, being presented blameless at the judgment seat of Christ, which is about rewards, not about salvation. Here's a little bit of backdrop about the reconciliation. We'll talk about the idea that sins are not imputed to an individual. And so that's the backdrop for understanding that passage, or maybe other things that come up. But essentially what we're talking about here is, let's just say that free grace and Catholics actually agree that salvation is by one moment of belief. The issue is that what results? Free grace says one moment of belief guarantees eternal results, that therefore guarantees eternal security. The Catholic says that these results are going to be it's a partial installment, and it's dependent on a process of keeping 7 sacraments or maybe even purgatory in there. So you got the one moment of belief, you got the one substitutionary death, but in their view, they think that death is water baptism as part of that above process, or dying to self. But in our view, you have the one resurrection, not dependent on the process of experiential sanctification. But in their view, you have the one resurrection that's dependent on the process above. So free grace is the biblical position, and the Catholic is the unbiblical system. So that's the thing to understand, is one is talking about a process of sanctification after that initial moment of belief, where the other one is focusing on a process of salvation, that if you don't complete this process, you're going to go to the lake of fire. Now, this is a reminder from my Taylor Barrett debate. This is my second debate with a Catholic. He almost tried to make it sound like the two systems were compatible, and he was saying faith alone is, but not free grace. So unless these people can show that you can be a free grace Catholic, these systems are mutually exclusive. All right, here's some cross-exam questions that I used, that I wrote down from my Taylor Barrett debate after reviewing it and gone through there, and that's it. So I'm gonna see how much on my time is. It's now 2:56. So yeah, I'm fixing to have to go backstage and start preparing in that way. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and release this.